So good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out, and thank you for Amy. And so I'm Elizabeth Hilty. My maiden name was Graver, and I grew up only a few miles from here. And today I'm here to share with you how God delivered myself from an abusive marriage. From the Amish cult system, and I'm not here for pity or sympathy. I'm here for Jesus, for His kingdom. And my prayer is that my story not only brings hope, but also brings courage, and it also reminds you of God's love, and you feel His presence today. Because in Psalms 139, God reminds us that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. So, I grew up, and I was the oldest in a family of 13. For the most part, my childhood, I had happy memories. My parents worked hard to provide a happy life for me and my siblings. And there's one thing that always stood out to me, and that my mother quoted. As I grew up, she would often quote John 14:6, I am the way and the truth and the life, and nobody comes to the Father but through me. She would quote it in German, because we did not have English Bibles. But that verse stuck with me, and at a very young age, and to this day, it still means a lot to me. I lived here in this community until 2017. I moved away with my children. So throughout as I'm talking, I will try to refer back when I was still living in the community, and then there were times where I might forget to say. So you can just kind of put in a timeline. 2017, I moved away. Currently, I live in Milford, Indiana, which is between Berne and Warsaw. But I loved school, especially softball. First and second grade, I went to South Adams, and I was really sad when my parents pulled me from the public school system and sent me to the Amish school system. I graduated from 8th grade, and I was excited for life. I was 17. I started dating Lewis, and he was a charmer. He was, and I fell for it. At 18 years old, I was baptized and became a member of the Amish church. And back then I got baptized because I loved Jesus. In 2007, I was 21 years old and I got married. Had no idea what I was walking into. But within a short time, it didn't take me long to understand that I had married a dangerous man. I became pregnant soon after. In the next 6 years, I gave birth to 6 sons, and had, within that six years time, I had 6 births and 2 miscarriages. I loved my children deeply, and they are what kept me going. But through it all, I always felt Jesus. Always. As the years went by, the abuse escalated, and there were many days and nights where I cried, nights where I would cry myself to sleep and be praying and just begging God to bring an end to the violence. But through it all, sometimes I would literally feel Jesus wrapping His arms around me. I was barely surviving, and November of 2012, Samuel was born. And he was special, very special. From the get-go, he almost never cried. He laughed at a very young age. He was never sick. He had the purest blue eyes. When I look out on a clear day at the sky, I see Samuel's eyes. They were blue, very blue. in March of 2013, my life was shattered. Tragedy struck, and Samuel died from SIDS. My faith was almost shattered because I asked God why He had to do that to me, and finding my baby dead in his crib. But I clung to Jesus. The Psalms were the only thing that brought me comfort, and my children. I remember sitting in the ER room holding Samuel after they had pronounced him dead. And a nurse sat there with me, and she told me, "You go home and you pour all that love onto your other children. They need you." And in my hand I had a shiny penny. When I got into the ambulance, I knew people were going to blame me, and somehow this was my fault. If only I would have done something different. So I just put my hands, rested my elbows on my knees and my hands, head in my hands, and I looked down, and right at my feet was a shiny penny. And I picked it up and I just held to it. I didn't know in the moment why, but it brought so much comfort to me, just like God was saying, "I am here. This is part of my plan for your life." And I didn't understand it. But as I sat there in the hospital room, a very dear friend came. She didn't live far from the hospital. And she came and sat there with me until other family members were able to come. And through that, she told me that, she told me that,
yeah.
Sure.
Can we use this?
She told me that pennies come from heaven, and God had sent that penny to me to let me know that He's there. And you know what? Through the years, I continued finding pennies, shiny pennies in places that are totally unexpected, where I usually don't see them. Through that, a few weeks before Samuel had died, a young Amish girl had confided in me about sexual abuse that she had been experiencing or had experienced in the past. And she had never talked about it to anyone. And I had promised her that I would be a voice for her. And then Samuel died, and I forgot about it. A few weeks after Samuel's death, one day as I was doing laundry, and then we had company that evening, that memory came back to me, and I remembered my promise that I had made to this little girl. And so I did. I went to the parents and I spoke to them about it, and through that, it involved a family member from Willis's family, and through that it became public within the Amish community. And Willis became enraged about it because he thought I should just stay silent. And I told him I can't. There are people being hurt, and I can't be silent. It's sin, it's abuse, and it is ruining molestation, sexual abuse, any type. It ruins children's lives. Through that is where some of the most horrendous abuse happened with Willis. He came home one night, and he was very upset because someone had mentioned to him that I had said that his family member had raped a little girl. I don't recall that I had used the word rape when I had talked about it, but it was nothing short of it. He came home, and him and I got into an argument about it. And I remember telling him that, well, if he doesn't understand what the word rape means, I will get the dictionary and prove it to him. And I did, and I read him the definition of it. And he said, well, that doesn't apply to little girls, only to grown women. I finally told him, I said, you just go outside and leave me alone, and I will, like, we'll talk about that later. There was a really violent episode that happened, and probably the hardest part was my boys had to watch it. My 4 and 5-year-old son, at the time with my 2 oldest, watched it, and my oldest son begged. He said, "Stop, Dad, please, you're hurting my mom." That was the hard part, because I couldn't protect my kids from experiencing that. Through all of that, a few days later, I was sweeping, and I look up, and I see this huge dent in the wall. And I was like, well, who threw a basketball at that wall? And that's where it hit me. That's where my head had hit the wall. And I understood why I felt the way I did. I probably suffered a severe concussion at the time and didn't know it. But anyway, years went on by. It helped me understand how, I started understanding how bad the situation was and that it was not getting better. Abuse continued. It was physical violence, intimidation, control, and there was repeated sexual assault within our marriage. And church members became involved. I was told by the church members to just be more submissive and forgiving, forgive and forget. Willis had, through that violent episode, Willis had been excommunicated for 6 weeks from the church, and I was told to never talk about it again because he was forgiven, he had a clean slate. I would have agreed with them had it stopped. I would have said yes, but it did not. Maybe not the exact same thing, but the abuse did not stop. Repentance, when repentance happens, it stops. So instead of protection from the church and the Amish community, I was pressured to stay silent. In 2014, God placed some amazing people in my life that connected me with a domestic violence agency out of Berne, Indiana. Those people became my lifeline, as well as my neighbor lady that lived across the road from me, who was not Amish. She was an amazing lady, and she still is. She was there and walked with me through my baby's death. She was there with me when I called the police. She was there with me all the way, and never once did she budge. She stood for what she knew was right. In late 2015, after years of desperation and begging, I have been begging to go to Rest Haven in Ocean, Indiana, which is a part of Oakland. And finally, after some amazing people in my life from Topeka, Indiana, they were able to get the ministers to agree to let me go. So I went to Rest Haven, and I found that I have a voice, and I began to heal and build backbone. In April of 2016, I returned home, and Willis returned home as well. I had really prayed that things would change, but he actually became a polite abuser. I don't know how many. If you guys know what a polite abuser is, but that is someone that learns to be very polite, and they scheme around ways. They learn to do abuse in ways that isn't recognizable by other people. And it gets worse. It's more hidden, it's more underground. I then, in that summer of 2016,
What was going
I
on?
became pregnant again, and my health was failing. It was not good at all. And so the abuse continued, even though ministers were still involved. they wanted to put a support group in place. And they were talking about sending us off to Whispering Hope, which is in Pennsylvania. And whatever you do, never send anyone there. Don't send them to the facilities that are run by the Amish or Mennonites, because they're not good. Not at all. I refused to go. And I was threatened that if I don't go, I would be shunned and that they would take my kids. Some of these conversations my voice overheard, which resulted in later on nightmares and night terrors from them. But anyway, in January 2017, I was 8 months pregnant, and Willis had repeatedly raped me. And I called the police, and I left. And I did it one morning after he had left for work. I had some very compassionate officers that came out and helped us. They took me and my children to safety. And for the first time, that is when I learned through this officer that took my statement that he said, what I just described to him is marital rape, and it is very real and wrong. So I went from there to a women's shelter with my children, and I was 8 months pregnant. It was very hard. In the middle of it, I didn't know from day to day where we're going to be the next day. Financially, I had no idea how I was going to support my children. I was pregnant and had 6 young children. Reuben, my oldest, he was 8 at the time. And so that was one thing that had kept me in my situation as long as it had, because financially I knew I could never make it. Or I thought I couldn't. That was what I thought. God had other plans. I left with $50 in my pocket. And all I heard was God saying, trust me. Go, trust me, I will take care of it. And he did. I look back and I'm like, I have no idea, God, how this all happened. Leaving and being able then to provide for my children. It wasn't without the help of other people. Willis was then charged with rape and later sentenced to prison, and the judge put a no contact order in place to protect my children and myself. But even after his conviction in court and being sent off to prison, the Amish community, they still declared him innocent. And I was shunned to the very extreme. Shunning has a different meaning in different communities to the extreme they will do it. For me, people were told to not even talk to me. And my family suffered severe consequences for that. They received unsigned letters, phone calls, and I did the same as well. And at first, the shunning felt very, very much like my life had ended, but it didn't take me long to understand that that's when my life began. Because God has a way of reaching down and bringing us to the truth in a way that we never expected. That was when God got me to himself, because I was now shunned. I couldn't partake in communion. I couldn't partake in any community events. So it was just me and my children and God. And so I started searching in what shunning is. I started searching for the truth. And I read the Bible for myself. I asked God for answers. And I started understanding that Jesus does not condemn me. And my connection with God has not been cut off just because I have been shunned. Because within the Amish, they often, and this varies also from community to community, but this very specific community that I grew up in, which most of you probably live here, when a person gets shunned, they say that they have cut off your connection with God. And nobody can do that.
it cannot cut your connection with God. They tell you that the only way that connection can be restored is if you come back and become a member of the Amish community, which requires you to get down on your knees in front of the church and say that I am very sorry for what I did. And that's what they were asking me to do, is to come back to the church here in Berne and get down on my knees and say that I am very sorry, that I reported my ex-husband, now ex-husband, but husband at the time, to the police, and that I gave my statement and testified against him. And that I was wrong, because ultimately the marriage was more important to them than my safety or my children's safety. But in 2021, after Willis was released from prison. He was released from prison after he had acquired a sentence modification. And he was on home detention, and he kept asking for the courts to modify the no contact order on me and my children. Mostly he would ask to have it modified on only the children and not myself. But at that point in time, he didn't have much say in it. The children were so young, and the courts protected them. But it was through all of that that there was a church in Shipshewana that I moved into, that bishop actually removed my shunning. And through that time, once I became a member of the Amish church again, I started understanding the control that they have on you and what I am living under again. And I deeply regretted for not leaving while I was shunned. Through that, I prayed and I told God, I said, if you really want me to leave the Amish community and that whole system, then make a way for me and I will follow. And he did. He made a way for me to leave. And the other thing that also came up that I knew I couldn't stay Amish was I was being pressured to reconcile with Willis. And in my heart, I knew that would never happen. I was done. I had given him so many chances. I had tried so many things through the years, and I couldn't do it anymore. And so I mentioned something to the boys because I had people within the Amish community, saying what all will happen after he gets off of probation. And so I asked my boys, I said, I want your perspective on this. What are you going to do if I let your dad back into the house or into my life and your life? They did not even hesitate. My older boy said, Mom, if you let him back in, once we turn 16 years old, we're gone. We'll be out of your life as well. And I promised them I would never do that to them. And it was at that point in time that they told me they don't plan on staying Amish. And I never would have judged them for that if I would have chosen to stay Amish. But they convicted me on a lot of things my kids did. God used them in mighty ways. My divorce, which I filed for a legal separation first while I was still Amish. And then in 2022, when I left the Amish completely, I filed for a divorce. And then in 2023, the divorce was finalized. Leaving the Amish was one of the hardest things that I did, besides leaving my ex-husband, because it cost me nearly everything I had ever known. My family, friendships, community, but God, He did. He remained faithful through it all. And I can stand before you today and I can say that the chains of abuse, fear, and generational bondage, they're gone. They've been broken. how God protects us, of his faithfulness and his love. And so, if anyone is watching today online or is here today, if you're hurting, just know that God loves you. He hears you, he sees you, and you are not alone. There is hope, there is healing, and there is freedom in Jesus Christ. In June of 2025, which was almost a year ago, I got baptized again, and that conviction came through my kids again. Like I said, my kids convicted me of so many things. They're amazing. Our church, where we go to now, they were doing baptismal services on Father's Day last year. We were on our way home from church a few weeks before, and I told my boys, I said, just so you know, if you ever do decide to get baptized, there are baptismal services coming up, and I will be here for you, but I want you to know that that is a decision between you and God, nobody else. And I want you to know that it's going to be that way forever. And they came up with the question, Mom, when are you getting baptized? And I told them, I said, well, I was baptized when I was 18, and my one son, and he knows exactly which one he is, goes, Mom, you know that that was underneath the Amish system and what all that consisted of. And you need to renounce all of that. And I was convicted instantly. This was on a Sunday, and Monday and Tuesday, I struggled so bad with signing up for baptism because the thoughts behind me were, what will my family say? What will the Amish people say? What will all of these people say when they find out that I am baptized? Because they tell you that if you get baptized the second time, it will void the first baptism. And then the second baptism also becomes meaningless. And you might as well would never have got baptized or accepted Jesus in the first place. And so I wrestled with all of that. I struggled with it. And finally, by Tuesday night, I said, no, I'm going to do it. It doesn't matter what people think. This is about God and myself. And so with that, I signed up. And instantly, I just sobbed. And I did. I got rebaptized. And I'm not sorry that I did it. It has been the most freeing thing that has happened to me, aside from being set free from abuse and all the other chains that I was attached to. So within the Amish church, I don't know how many of you are aware of this or not, but when you get baptized, you automatically become a member. And to me, from my understanding from the Bible, that's not biblical. They should never be connected. That you promise to stay within a certain church denomination, and you can never leave that church, because if you do what they said, I thought I would be going to hell if I did. But thank you to Jesus, I know I'm not. And another thing that I had wanted to touch on earlier, and it slipped my mind, is when you do have children or even adults within the Amish community, and if you are someone out there that is helping these people or wanting to help them, and you know that there is sexual assault or any form of abuse going on, there's a huge language barrier. We grow up speaking a totally different language. And one thing that really stood out to some of the people that I work with that help people with sexual, help victims of sexual abuse and sexual assault or whatever, even domestic violence, is when you would ask a little Amish girl or a boy if they have been sexually abused or molested, they would probably look at you like, what are you talking about? But here's the word that they would connect with you. Were you bothered? They will connect with you on that. So that's just an example of the language barrier that is between the Amish and general culture of society. So if you know of them, find someone that understands the language, and not necessarily that you need to have them go talk to the child or the adult, but ask them. Just yesterday morning, I received a message from a very dear friend, and she asked me, "Do you speak the Swiss Amish?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, I have a voice message that an attorney friend is trying to figure out what it says, and she's nobody to translate it for her." She said, "Do you think you could do that?" So she sent me the message. And lo and behold, I recognized right away who the people were that were talking. My lips are sealed on that, on who it is, their identity. But those are the things that if you're an attorney or a victim advocate or whatever, and you are helping someone, find those people that are willing to educate you on the language and help you translate. In 2024, in August of 2024, I had the privilege of, it didn't feel like a privilege, but it actually was, because I got to help these little girls. I was connected to a forensic interviewer in southern Indiana, and she had 3 little Amish girls that were sexually abused. They couldn't understand English, so they were looking for someone to translate, and I don't even remember how I was connected to them, who made the connections, but I got to go down and be the interpreter between them. It was life-changing for me. That's where I knew the pain that I had gone through was not for nothing. It was not for nothing, because even if it's just these 3 little girls that I was able to help, it was worth it. That I was able to relate to them, and I understood their pain. The other thing I wanted to touch on is, you're probably having questions on, do my children have contact with their dad? They do not. At this point in time, they do not have contact with their dad whatsoever. And it is because of the children wishing to not have contact with him. Last summer, my 2 oldest boys, they got saved. And then in September, Reuben got baptized, my oldest. And I actually had the privilege of baptizing him. I'm going to be bringing it to a close, but I will say this: God will never lose. Satan was defeated when Jesus arose from the grave, and heaven rules. And where I came across the heaven rules is about a month ago. I came across a devotional that is called Heaven Rules, and I really wanted it, and so I bought it. And it just stood out to me. It's about the life of David. And in the preface, there was a little story called Samuel's story. And it's about a little baby that died. Not about my baby, because that's what my baby's name was Samuel. But I got stuck in that little story and haven't been able to continue reading the devotional. So I think God wanted me to see this, that heaven rules, because this little baby died, and I had no idea what the name Samuel meant. Samuel means God has heard. And when Samuel was the baby is when I had cried and pled out to God and begged and asked him to bring this to me. And then he took Samuel from me and took him to heaven. And so that's why I say heaven rules, Samuel's there.
a couple days back, and she said, I've kind of been thinking about this too. So what we're going to do is just open it up for questions, because there's so many differences in the English and the Amish culture that when I first started meeting with Elizabeth, I didn't understand that a little Amish child would not understand the word molestation. I had no clue. They would have no idea what I was talking about. And so, and then also about the baptisms, tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe that when they're baptized in the Amish church, it's not only about membership, but you're baptized into the name of the Father, the Son, and the Amish church.
Yes.
And that blows my mind. Like, to take the Holy Spirit out of the whole concept that the old man is dying and the new man is being raised up makes no sense whatsoever. It's not biblically sound, but it gives me clarity into why it would be so hard for a person inside of the church to leave. If you not only are going to lose your family members and not have contact and all the things that you love and you were brought up knowing, and all of that is going to be gone, and then on top of that feel like when you leave you are breaking a promise that you gave to Jesus. I mean, it is bondage. And so those were new things for me. I just was like, I had no idea. We have, I love the Amish community. We have lots of friends, but for some reason we just missed all that. And so I want to open it up to questions. Chad has a microphone here, even if we have great sound here. It's surely, I don't know, but we'll get it figured out. But if we have questions, we'll just pass this around.
I don't know if
Yeah,
it's
turn it on.
a question
There it is.
or a comment. I work with a lot of the Amish in my business, which is DJ's Therapeutic. I have been told that their daughter refuses to go with grandpa. And it's just grandpa time, and they don't know why she won't go. And I said, if she is refusing and crying her eyes out, with you dare let her go. And they said, but it's his life. I said, no. He is taking advantage of her. They said, you think? I said, I know. Do not make her go. So they didn't. The next time she came back for an appointment, she said, I didn't. And she told me, thank you. And I said, well, that was very scary for her. And she said, how did you know? And I said, because I was molested starting at age of 3. And why did that happen? So I can relate to these kids.
You're being a voice.
And I've been told a lot of things. And I love the Amish community, and I love that you guys stand beside each other. I love that. If I have a couple in there, and the woman will not talk, and the man is there, I know there's a problem. Because when the man isn't there, she'll talk to me freely.
Mm-hmm.
But if he's there, she will not talk. And you understand that, I know. But I'm just telling you, there are things out there that we are unaware of, but they are happening. And she said she doesn't let any of her daughters go in with grandpa time anymore, and the dad understands it now. And he will not let them do it, and the boys. And I said, that's the best thing, because it's not just girls being abused. It's true, there are abuse on both sides.
I do want to say one thing. In saying all of these things, like about the Amish, I'm not here to bring shame to them. I wouldn't be here if I wouldn't have felt called to come here. I believe their souls are rooted in heaven, and that's why I'm here.
And I totally agree with you, because I see the good in a lot of the Amish, and I see the bad. Just like there are bad in the English, there are bad in the
That's true.
Amish.
Very true.
There are bad in the Mexicans, there are bad in the blacks, there are bad everywhere. So I don't want it to be, I'm against the Amish because I'm not at all. I just want people to, just like you said, there's a thing you can't say to them because they do not understand it. They don't start learning English until they go to school. But the one day I had little girls in there and I asked her to do something, she doesn't understand that. I said, well, she's doing it. But they're striving to learn the English as fast as they can. But, no, I think the Amish community, it has its part, it's very good. There are, like you said, I also had a woman come in and she was not herself, and I said, tell me what is going on. And she's come to me for a few years. And she said, well, I said, tell me what's going on. Her daughter just left the Amish church. She said, that means I have to shun her. I said, no. You have the choice. Do you want to shun your daughter? She said, no. I said, why did she leave? Well, her husband wants the cars. I said, okay. And she said, well, and they took their little girls. That they would sit at my feet as I sewed. I said, okay. And she said, and now none of them are going to heaven. I said, whoa. Do you think I'm not going to heaven because I'm not Amish? She was, oh no, you never were Amish, so you may still go. I said, that's not the Bible I study. That's not what I believe. If you've accepted the Lord Jesus Christ as your Savior, you're going to heaven. God doesn't care if you're Baptist, English, Amish, Roman Catholic. He doesn't care as long as you accept the Lord Jesus Christ in your life. The rest doesn't matter to God.
That's right.
And she said, really? So she's going to be in heaven with me? I said, absolutely. And she said, that's the best news I have heard.
Do we have any other questions for Elizabeth? There's one in the back, Mr. Beachy.
I just want to say, I think what Pastor Amy was saying there ago is exactly why there are more abusers among the Amish, because it is so difficult to leave. You leave all your friendship, your culture, your family, everything. Plus, in the back of your mind, even if you're not living a righteous life, you still have that in the back of your mind. If you leave the Amish, you're doomed. You're lost. You're going to hell. There's that in the back of your mind. But that's still the most important thing, is to stay Amish. So I think there's more. Yes, there are bad people in every group, but I think there's more there because of those reasons.
It kind of gives them a place to thrive, because we're told not to report abuse. And I don't know how many of you know this or not, but they actually go back to when God told Noah to build the ark, to pitch the ark inside and out so no water can come in, to save the people and the animals on the inside. So the Amish church actually, or the people, they refer to their church that God has pitched it inside and out. And if any of that were to leak outside, then it would just start a big leak. And they think they are the light of the world. And again, this is the community that I grew up in. Those were the teachings there. Because when I did move to Orange County, they were a lot more open-minded and a lot more liberal. And I had some really good people that helped me there. But what I did find out is when we come down to the core system, to that one pillar they stand on, which is the organ, they all fall back to those same values and beliefs.
Anybody else? Over here, Chad?
I'm just curious your advice as a teacher and an Amish in their classroom or in this community. how do we connect with them and reach out to them to try to help, not just on abuse, but just to show them, you know, that we are Christian, we are Christ followers, and that they can see that.
I say hand the mic to Linda McKean.
You know, that's not a bad idea.
She's right over there. She
Yeah.
has experience with that.
While you're walking over there, I just want to say, having a safe person to talk to is a big deal. And when you're in the culture, nobody's safe. Like, I guess if I was to look at myself as a child and everybody around me knows it's happening, but nobody's doing anything about it, then the safe person has to come outside of that circle. And so being a safe person and, you know, I don't know how you express that, but I'm sure the Lord will help you. That would be powerful.
Before Linda does answer, I did, so in second grade, I had, this is what everybody calls Mrs. Tooley, Kathy Tooley, her my teacher. And she was amazing, but she spoke a lot of truth into me, to the point that to this day I have contact with her. And I always knew she was a safe person. So even though you don't say it to that child, being around them, just listening to what they have to say, even if they're just talking about their everyday life.
I was a 4th grade teacher for years, and second grade at South Adams. And I loved having Amish kids in my classroom because they were so grateful for everything. They were taught to always say thank you and to just be so grateful. Once a child was in my room, I always told him, you'll always be one of the children. And I keep up with 4 Amish girls from 4th grade every time they have a baby, and I go and visit them and make something for them and do, you know, take them diapers or whatever. But the main thing is I want to keep a relationship with them because they do hunger for that relationship. And we English have a powerful message to share, and it's right here in our backyard. And so I pray that I can be consistent in my walk with Jesus and that I can continue to minister to those girls. I don't know what's going on. I learned something from you the other Sunday that upset me about one of them I visit, but I do feel that there are some saved Amish, and yet they're held under by all that bondage of rules. And so I don't know, you know, how that fits together. It's very hard to put it together. So yeah, keep up the work with the relationships.
Anybody else?
What do you do for a living to support your family?
I actually drive school bus. And lo and behold, my own kids ride with me. That's not the lo and behold, because I love it. But they gave me a route that almost nobody else wanted anymore, and so many drivers had come along and ended up saying, I'm quitting or give me another route. And so I got stuck with that route. I had the trailer park kids. I had all the kids with abusive past, some Happy and Judy. But there again, prayer is the key. God has literally been turning that bus around, and it has been my older boys, even my younger boys, they helped me with that. And one day, just the other week, I always have WFRN playing, which is a Christian radio station. A song came on and they started yelling, turn it up, turn it up. And so I did, and it was Dusty Bibles. And before I knew it, the bus was echoing with the kids singing along, and I had tears rolling down my cheeks.
Praise God.
Would you mind to share your testimony?
Your testimony of your own knowledge of your sin and needing God's salvation, or He can provide for you and for forgiveness of sins.
Sure. So mine was depression, anxiety, PTSD, and I also struggled really bad with a lot of negativity. Just, I don't know how to put this into words. And thinking I'm not good enough for anyone. A lot of the big things, and I know those are big things because to me, depression led to a lot of things in trying to find my own worth into other things that were not from God. And when I was convicted of all of that, it was very humbling for me because I started understanding with the very, very poor and needy sinner that I am for Jesus. And Jesus is the only one that can make me whole. There is no other person that can cure me from my depression, from anxiety and PTSD, and all these other thoughts that I had going on in my head, and thinking that surely some other person is my savior. And that's, I don't even know when, like, where it all began on the very date. But I do remember that it was a year and a half ago when I got very serious because my health was still not the way I wanted it to be. And I got very serious and I said, God, you need to heal me spiritually, mentally, physically, in every which way that you can. And I know you can do it. I said, heal me. Make me the person that you want me to be. And he did. There were a lot of ugly things that came out of me that God showed me where I thought the Amish people from Berne were worthy of redemption. For one, there was a lot of unforgiveness. Just a lot of things like that. And I know many people within the Amish community, they struggle with alcohol and all those things that go with that. And then I kind of feel like people think, maybe I did those things. That was one struggle I never had. Mine was more on the inside of myself where people never seen it. On the outside, it looked like I was good, I was okay. And I had these deep, deep struggles inside of me that nobody ever found out about. Does that answer your question?
Anybody else? Yeah.
I just wanted to say self-worth is one of the things that, at least in this community, people don't get because they don't see the empowerment of the Holy Spirit. So if you can speak life into some, in your classroom, I would say speak life into them. If you can give them a hug, if they'll allow you to even. If you can just put your arm around them and speak life into them. They all need that. If you just watch, when you go and see a buggy coming down the road, and it's an Amish woman, and she's in her bonnet, and look at those depressed eyes. Just focus in and zoom in, and I would say 90% of them just look, dead, spiritually dead. That's what it is. There's another way to put it. So speak life into them, and self-worth is needed, and then because they don't believe in being saved, so they have the thing called hope, but it's only a false hope. If it were a living hope, and you went to a funeral, you'd see joy instead of just fears. So fear is one of the biggest things that stands between this community and being saved.
Daniel, reiterate that real quick. So that's another thing that opened my eyes with the Amish is that as I became a believer in my mid-20s. And so when I discovered the Lord, when He called me to Himself, there was an instant hope and grace and love for Jesus Christ, and I know that I'm saved, even though I'm a broken mess, right? And then you are sanctified after that. But so what I learned about the Amish though was they don't believe they're saved. They believe there's a hope to be saved, and that if you say I am saved by the blood of Jesus Christ, it actually comes across prideful. Mm-hmm. How dare you think that you know that you're saved? And so since I've learned that, I've talked to numerous people about that, and it's a belief system. Can you speak to that a little bit? It's a hope for salvation.
Well, they read King James only in German, so they wouldn't, I mean, I'm not saying none of them read English. We had German English Bibles at home, actually. But it was only, we read to read. We didn't read to understand. So when we read Scripture, if you read like Romans 10:9, it says, if you believe in your heart, the Lord, whatever, I can't say it all, but you will be saved. And you would just have them read that and have them read it. And it says silly. It says silly in the German. Silly means blessed. It more or less means the same thing, but it doesn't. It's like, what is the difference between saved and a living hope? There is really no difference. But their hope is that they can stay within these church rules and that they can do these things well enough here on earth, and that they can come in front of the bishop and confess their sins, even if it's every 2 weeks, and that they do these things faithfully, that hope will become real someday. And the perception of it is a deception. So if you went and told them that you're saved, they might take it from you. But if I went and told them I'm saved, they sound deceitful.
The whole thing is so flip-flopped and crooked, isn't it? And it's sad to me. So like what I want you to leave with today isn't like some sort of separation that we've like got things figured out and they don't. And that's not it at all. I hope you're not hearing that. What I want you to see is that we have people standing right next to us in the grocery stores and on the roads and everywhere you look that may not have the hope of Jesus Christ and believe it and know that they're saved. Like that's a mission field. Like you don't have to go anywhere. It's right here. And it's people we interact with every single day. So.
There's one other thought that I had wanted to tell you guys. This is just an example of the extent that the Amish, like they are, if someone does leave, especially in a situation where I did, they are, the extent they are willing to go to. So when my baby died, he died from SIDS. There was obviously an investigation and it was ruled SIDS. So after Willis had gone to prison, they were so desperate to have control of the boys because obviously they weren't in control. That there were Amish men that went to the detective and told the detective that Elizabeth is on meds. She's not fit to have her children. She's put one of her sons to the grave already. And so with that whole case with my baby's death was beginning to be reopened. But thankfully, I had an attorney at the time and the prosecutor. Him and my attorney worked together and they both got it shut down and said, no, there was a thorough investigation done. There was no foul play and we are not going through this again because they are on a witch hunt to get these kids and we're not going to tolerate it. But those are the levels that they are willing to go to try to prevent someone from leaving or from abuse being exposed.
I'd like to add a little question or explain a little bit about that hope, and why they look at hope as opposed to ability. Romans 8:24, for in this hope we were saved, but hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what we already have? Or if we hope for what we do not have, we wait for it patiently. So they look at that and see that, oh, we can only hope, we can't know, but they don't recognize in Hebrews 6 it says, this hope we have is an anchor of the soul goes through and steadfast. It's a solid hope. It's not a, oh, I hope so. It's a solid. And they also don't recognize 1 John 5:13 says, these things are written to you who believe in the name of the Son of God, that you may know that you have eternal life. And I remember so clearly when my brother pointed that verse out to me when I was young. I was like, oh, wow, that's totally different. Never knew that was there. So, but that's what they see. They see that emphasis there. Well, if you see it, you don't have hope. Well, we don't see it yet, but we have a solid assurance that it's coming. So I think that's the passage they would look to say, we can't be sure, we have to hope.
Thank you. Anybody else? Else?
You may not know this, okay, but I'm going to ask. I can't go all the way, I'm going to partially later. The Amish, they have a belief of abuse that they go to before the Lord at that.
Can you repeat that?
The abuse in the Amish, they have like a class that they can go to. Are you aware of that?
Is it the abuse awareness team?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that was put in place after, it was started in other Amish communities. And then when our case came out and I left, that moved, they started here. And sadly, what has been happening is that abuse awareness team is the in-between between the victims and law enforcement. And sadly what happens is these victims do not get help the way they should. And we have a good example of a lady that was just got out on bond, domestic violence situation, and she's now has a level 6 felony on her. And he's made out to be the victim, and she's made out to be the perpetrator when he's an alcoholic. And my whole point is, this has been going on for over 10 years, but the abuse awareness team says, we just didn't know what to do about it anymore. And she came to church in the past with black and blue face. So I believe it's a good thing they're trying to do, but they need to do more. They need to step up. And they need to do their actual job that they were trying to do, because if this lady would have been educated, had the right people in her life and educating her in what to do, she never would have been in this predicament.
In Indiana State Code, it says that we are a right to tell state. So like if you were to know that abuse was going on, you have to report that. And I work in counseling coaching arena, and again, if somebody comes to me and says, hey, something has happened, I have to report that. But in Indiana code, clergy is exempt from that. So your bishops are exempt from that. You know, and pastors are exempt from that. They get to weigh out if they feel like an abuse has actually happened, and then they get to analyze if that person has been forgiven or restored. And then, so there's this loophole that the clergy can kind of walk around and doesn't have to report it. And so that's a huge problem in Indiana. And I was not aware of that, and I worked in politics for a lot of years, and I wasn't aware of that until I met Elizabeth. And there's also another small loophole that says if someone comes to you and reports, as a clergy member, if someone reports a crime, so say a little girl came to me, and I hate using myself as an example, but came to a clergy member, and the clergy member had a friendship with Dad. And the little girl is saying, hey, Dad is doing these things to me. He gets to make the decision of reporting or not determined on knowing Dad, and I don't know, she could have been fabricating, you know, I know Daddy's a good guy, this and that. And so they don't have to report. It's just a few words in the Indian code that make that possible. So, anybody, that riles anybody.
I was kind of upset with that one.
Can you give some examples of the rules? I was reading some and I'm going, give some of what you had to?
They vary by church system. But, so I grew up in a mile east of Amishville, which John grew up in the church district south of that. And we were literally considered the lowest, most conservative church, like in the community. And so if you've ever heard of like the Swords and Trooper Amish, so it was very similar to them. And so it was the bare basics that we had, outhouses and all of that, which you guys know. But the church rules, I don't even know like where to start with all of them. Our buttons and pleats. No buttons, hooks and eyes. Hooks and eyes. Shirts couldn't be open all the way. Dresses, the big thing in our church district was like when we weren't allowed to wear suits, like the cape and apron and the dress couldn't be the same color. Dress and apron, some of us had same color apron as dress, but that was always a big issue. How the strings on your apron, how they were made, was always a big issue. How long your cap strings were was a big issue. And here's an example. When I was getting baptized, I supposedly had 2 long apron strings and 2 long cap strings. So I had to cut them off.
Where did they think this was from?
But anyway, this one is a funny one. The other week, I was driving for a field trip, and we went to Studebaker Museum. The other lady driving is originally from this community as well. She's a first cousin to my mom. And so Studebaker Museum is a historical thing, and they have these old hats. And I picked up the one hat and put it on my head, and we both fell over laughing. And she goes, "I know exactly what you're thinking." And I said, "Our caps growing up," because they literally were just floppy, like they had no shape whatsoever. And other people around us had no idea why we were laughing. But those are some things. The men always had to wear like a certain type of suspenders. Their hats were 4-inch brim, 4-inch crown. Now other districts were a little different. Some of them, their hair had to be like cut a certain way. It had to come. He used to be like that.
A certain bowl that you did?
Pardon?
You had a certain bowl you put on your head?
Didn't do that. Yes.
So my question is, with all these rules and things that you have to do, if you question them, what is the sound reasoning behind it?
It's the way we've always done it.
That's what, there's nobody questioning.
I did.
I mean, like, show me in the Bible where this is written that my heir needs to be this thing, or my ribbon penalty is this thing. I just cannot understand.
It's the way you've been brought up, too.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess it's just the way that, so you don't.
There are people that questioned it, and they got kicked out of the church.
So that's basically what happens.
Yes.
If you question, like,
Yeah.
I don't understand, like, why our buggies don't have, like, roofs.
Yeah.
Like, why is that different from one Amish community to another? Like, how do they interpret in the Bible that it's okay, but it's not okay here? Like, why? I just don't understand.
So another big thing was, so my dad was considered a fence pusher. And we were supposed to have springs like underneath for the seats. And him and a few others never did. They had like what they call wooden seats on our open buggies. And he always refused to like change it. And I'm glad he did, because I think that's where I became, where I knew it was okay to question things. But with that, that was an issue, and then there were supposed to be only 2 reflectors in the back, and 2 you could have reflectors up front, but only 2. Kerosene lanterns we use on our buggies. A lot of times it was only 1. The second one, they would maybe sometimes see something, but then eventually they were okay with that. But it was 6-volt blinkers. Couldn't have 12-volt.
So do they not consider the safety of the children riding in those buggies, or the people that are riding in those buggies, to be?
They believe God will take care of them. And if it's meant, an accident is meant to happen and somebody's killed, it was part of God's plan.
So how do you get around? I'm sorry, I just have a question. But like when I left the hospital with my children, each one of them had to have a car seat test. So they're in the car seat, they have to be in there for so long that they can breathe and everything to be safe to leave the hospital. And the hospital inspected the car seat in the car before we pulled out.
Well, we have midwives. We really went to the hospital. All 7 of my boys, the Samuel was as well, were born at a midwife. Which my youngest was born in Topeka, Indiana, and it was at a birthing center. But that was, to me, it was like a hospital to me. But they have drivers usually that come and take them home, but they don't have that nurse that comes out like and making sure that everything is okay. It's just the midwife there. And I don't think she practices anymore. She was shut down a little after I left because she wasn't licensed or certified, and she was administering shots and drugs. And a lot of that, I felt bad for her. There were 2 of them, and I felt bad for both of them because they had asked to become licensed and certified, and the church denied them. But they still wanted them to continue to practice because it was a whole lot cheaper than going to the hospital. But I know when my second youngest was born, I always had a hard time with where they had to give me shots to stop bleeding. And when my second youngest was born, she always before gave it in my thigh. And I asked her, why are you giving it in my arm? And I almost died from it. But my head felt like it was going to burst. My heart felt like it was exploding. And she kept watching me, and I said, like, what is wrong with me? And she goes, well, I'm just trying to see if you're going to make it or not. If you're going to be okay.
Because I didn't grow up in Indiana. And so I moved here much later in life. And so this was all very foreign to me when I moved here. And so to me, things just stand out, like the legality of being on a roadway and not having your children safely secured and buckled. I don't understand how that's legal. And how did they get around that?
Well, they have like a steering committee, and there are people that are on there that they actually go down to the White House, and they somehow get around all these things.
We've got a question.
Okay. Yeah, so this is back to the Youth Awareness Committee. Yeah. So, yeah, we're from Nephilim, and so something happened to our oldest daughter. She was 21 years old at the time, and that awareness committee came to our house, and yeah, that they were not very satisfactory, and I felt they weren't open and honest with us, and in the end, they kind of shifted it towards our daughter, that it's her fault. They questioned people that were not even involved. And so in our experience, we felt that they had no outside training, like the police or hospital or psychiatrists or psychologists, people that know how to help people that were abused. And in the end, it was just, I was glad when we were free of them because they caused more harm than good in our situation.
Well, like I said, that started after I left, but just from what I've seen and the things that I've heard, they have meetings where the men are getting up and talking about abuse from a woman's perspective, or like a woman's view. Those topics, a man can view it from this point, but honestly, I believe a woman should talk as well and give her perspective and her view in what it has done to her, not just the men talking.
Yes, in fact, one of the head committee member said that they're having a meeting, and he suggested that it would be good to have a woman there to speak, and he asked me if I would. And I said I would, but I'd like to speak with my husband about it, but I said I'm sure that he'll be okay with it. But he never got back to me. And then the house where we live, it belonged to Amish people before we moved there. So our address is still on the Amish mailing list. So we got a little booklet of the minutes of one of those awareness meetings. You're laughing.
Yeah, because I read it.
Yeah, and I know one of the people that wrote some of the minutes, and I remember that in his article, he said, we need to keep our Amish men out of the jails. And then he also said his only reference to like a sexual abuse was about a girl. He never mentioned the men's part in the equation.
To me, that's the issue is somehow they always bring it back to the victim that somehow she had to do something to cause, for it to become a problem. And when in reality, it's over here. It's hold that perpetrator accountable and then provide the right services for the victim. And she will no longer be a victim. And if they hold him accountable, you won't have any more victims from that perpetrator. But sadly, that's not the case.
The abuse board is a great concept to help victims after they've been abused, but the perpetrators need to go to jail. Like in the English culture, if you do something wrong, you go to jail, and that's what I don't understand. It's the same concept that you're speaking of. Is it kind of above the law or outside the law? How does that happen? How is that even orchestrated? I keep thinking about the Gospels. Jesus confronted the religious leaders, and even, I know this happens in all cultures, but it's the spirit of religion and the spirit of tradition and the spirit of control and the spirit of manipulation, all these things that the enemy wants to put upon people to keep them separated from Christ. I keep going back to that as everybody is speaking. It's bondage. And having an abuse board, they're all men. And having the abuse board kind of is a good concept in the sense if you're trying to, what are we going to do with the children now? Or, maybe, I don't know. I just think the number one step is tell. What happened to just telling? If there's abuse happening, just tell. But they want to protect the image. And this goes back to, the Pharisees and their long robes and you know, there are CCs and all of that stuff in it. But now it just looks like, to me, it just, you know, it just looks different on a buggy to me, because the same thing that was happening in the Gospels is the same thing that's happening today. It's the same enemy there as it is here, and it's not the people, it's the spirits inside of the people that are the real problem. You know, that's where the church needs to rise up and be in spiritual warfare and start being hands and feet of Christ and moving through the kingdom and taking authority and all the things. It's just, you know, we sit around and we're like, gee, well, that, you know, and we'll drive out here today and we'll pass people, and we should be doing something about it.
I know for me, one of the books in the Bible that really spoke to me on how God views abuse and violence is the book of Malachi. If you read that and study that, it's a very short book, but it goes into detail of how God views abuse and violence and how he hates it.
We're going to do one last question, because I know we've taken some time, but I have a question for you, and I know we've talked about this before, and it kind of blew my mind, and I just want to ask you again. From your perspective, what's the percentage of abuse that's happening inside the Amish house? Are we talking about 1 out of every 10? Are we talking 1 out of every 25? Where would you say, high, low, where would you say?
I've been asked this before, and I usually use a percentage on this. And so at some point in time, an Amish child will experience abuse. It doesn't, not necessarily sexual abuse, but it'll be spiritual, physical, emotional, verbal. Just like it's as common out, like it's in an everyday society as well. But an Amish child, at some point, either as a child, a teenager, or an adult, it's 99.9% that they will experience some form of abuse at some point in their life. And I know there are people that have disagreed with me on that, and they say, well, like, prove me otherwise.
I just think that should break our hearts. We're going to do a closing song, and while we do that, can we grab that basket? We're going to pass around a basket for a love offering for Elizabeth, for her courage to come and say all these hard things. You can take my glasses out of there, and giving glory to the Lord for what she has been through. And then this will go to her and her children. So.
And I want to tell you thank you all for coming. God's blessings to all of you. And we love all of us.